And good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you are in podcast land. Brendan Cunningham, the real estate doctor here at EXP. We have a cast of thousands today. Right next to me, we have Matt Paul. He's going to talk about all the things that I'm going to miss because he makes sure that we talk about the things that you need to hear. We don't tell you what you want to hear. We tell you what you need to know. Up above us is Pat Palzkill, who I've known for 22 years. Did you know it was 22 years, Pat?
No, it's been a long time. I know that.
Yeah, I remember when the Sox won the what are you going to
Series.
the World
The World
Series?
Series. Those were the good old days.
That's when we met, 2004. But at any rate, Pat has been in the real estate business. He's been a real estate broker. He's been a mortgage broker. He's been a speaker. He has done it all, similar to what almost like me. But he's also written a book. I've written a book. I've written 5 books, but he's written this book, which we're going to talk about today. This is almost a scary book, Real Estate Revolution: How AI, New NAR Rules, and Market Shifts Are Reshaping the Real Estate Business. Right there. If you want to know about real estate, you really need to read this book. I got to tell you, some of it's a little scary, but let me read what some of the author has written in here. I got to find my glasses now. Did I lose my glasses? Don't go away. Don't go away. Got to get my glasses. Oh, God, help me. I just held them in my hand. Don't go away. My glasses.
And Pat, you've been mainly up in the Northeast your whole career?
30 years in Boston, and then 30 years prior to that in the Midwest, in Chicago, in Wisconsin there.
Oh,
so Midwest roots. But my wife is from Quincy, Massachusetts. So we live in the South Shore now.
Awesome. Great.
4 kids in their 20s. So, what's happening in real estate affects my kids.
Yeah.
Sure does. And a big population. So that's a lot of what the book's for.
Oh, great.
Let me read a couple of things from here. Quick NFL highlights here. Real Estate Revolution. Wow. Okay. Welcome to the jungle, comrade. The real estate market isn't a polite tea party. It's George Orwell's Animal Farm crossed with Shark Tank on steroids. You got the pigs, big institutions, NAR remnants, flippers with cash stacks, hoarding the feed, while the rest of us chickens scratch for crumbs. You've got the sharks circling, iBuyers, hedge funds, all cash buyers, ready to devour any weak offer that limps into the tank, and you're either the prey or the apex predator who walks around. The rules are simple. The strong eat, the weak get eaten. Whoa, okay, let's have a softer approach here. And then he goes on to say, this isn't about...
That entices me to want to read it.
Okay.
I like that.
This isn't
That's
about
great.
being paranoid. It's about being prepared. The market doesn't reward the nice, the hopeful, or the lucky. It rewards the animal that trained the hardest while everyone else was scrolling Zillow dreaming. Get in shape or get eaten. Wow.
I like it.
Wow. Let me say, so listen, you mentioned Zillow. What's going on with Zillow?
Well, it's a portal. It's a portal. And they've been ahead of the game.
We hate Zillow.
It's all about information. And we've heard this story a million times, how things were when we grew up, and we had the listing book where the listings were in a catalog, and they may come in, published every 2 weeks, and that was access to information. But with the advent of Zillow and the internet, the information's out there, which is great for the consumer. But, another part of what the book is about is, about the National Association of Realtors lawsuit that came about, and it's really kind of changed the commission structure across the country, where, instead of the seller paying the full tab now, their tab could be cut in half initially. So, for example, on $1 million house, and again, commissions vary all over the country, but if the commission's 5%, that's $50,000 that the seller pays for, and it's been there. One of the reasons is because that's where the money is. When a seller sells the house, there's money available there, and people are grabbing it. But now with the big change, that tab for the seller could be cut in half. That's a $25,000 savings for the seller. But you add that to the bill of the buyer when for first-time buyers now, the average home buyer is 40 years old. It's a crime. So it's bad now for first-time buyers, but take it and it's going to be much, much worse. So something's got to change. You look at the 1950s, the average home buyer was in their 20s. So if you have a 30-year mortgage, by the time they're 50, they could have it paid off. But now, if the average first-time buyer is 40 years old on a 30-year mortgage, that's 70 years old before they get their mortgage paid off. That's not right. That's closer to slavery than anything else. So you got to look at what the options are, and they're kind of limited. But in Chapter 10, the news is better. There is options to get out of this,
Mhm.
and it's a good way to end the book.
It is. As I was reading this book, it reminded me of Thanksgiving dinner over my Italian relative's house, where turkey was kind of like a side dish. Like you had so many things to eat. You didn't know where to begin. It went on for 10 hours. It's like, so what's the most important thing for me to get out of this? I mean, for the kids, it was that we wanted the turkey. So we have the NAR rules, we have AI, we have market shifts. If you had to pick one of these dragons to beat up, which is the most concerning for you? The NAR rules, AI, or the market shifts?
Well, AI is going to happen. AI is going to happen, and it's likely that there's going to be a lot of people that aren't working. You look at the average person right now under the age of 40. About 75% are employed, and 25% aren't. You have a lot of baby boomers that are going to be leaving the stage. So there's a lot of moving pieces in this, but from an AI standpoint, what if we reach 75% unemployment? So, well, is that good or bad? Well, one of the big advantages, and the thing is, and one of the reasons why I call it revolution, is you have the agricultural revolution, that caused a big shift. Instead of people being nomads, they settled in rural communities. And then you had the Industrial Revolution, where, people moved to the cities. I believe that the AI and robotics revolution is going to have people leaving the big cities
Right.
and moving to secondary cities. And you look at that. I mean, people are leaving Boston, they're leaving LA, they're moving to places like, again, Buffalo's not necessarily,
Like
they're
Buffalo.
moving to Buffalo.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
one of the top 10 cities right now that
Yeah.
people are moving to
Number
because it's
2.
affordable.
Yep. But they're also
You
saying
know?
in 5 years it won't be affordable because everyone's going to come here.
Well, and then you look at the housing situation. I don't think there's a housing supply problem. It boils down to the interest rate is, what I get into in the chapters, and how to fix that. But 10% of the houses in America are vacant. 10% of the houses are vacant. And you have 20 to 30% of the commercial properties that are also vacant that could be converted into housing. So there's not really a supply problem. It's the affordability problem. And you can't bring prices down. That's not good for baby boomers or existing homeowners. So if you don't need to build more properties, you can just fill what you have, and you can't bring the prices down. Really, the only thing left in the formula is the interest rate. And you look at other countries around the world, for example, in Japan, the average interest rate is 1%. You look at China, 97% of the people own their home there. 97% of the people in China own their home. Romania, 95%, Russia, 93%, Singapore, 91% own their home. 90% of it's free and clear. So there's plenty of examples around the country of countries where the majority of the people own their home free and clear. And when you bring AI into the situation, you have some great cities like Boston that have survived because it's been a big knowledge base with the colleges and everything. You have one of the highest college college educated concentrations in the world. But now with AI, everybody in the world is smarter than anybody in Boston when you bring AI into it. So real estate's always been location, location, location. What a big focus of the book is be careful of where you buy, because it's probably not going to be like it's always been, with remote work, and the taxes in these big cities and the overall infrastructure. My premise is a lot of these big cities are already dead and they don't even know it. So the best option is put forward in chapter 10 is just like when the Pilgrims came over. We have to start over in places in America and build sustainable cities as the footprint that can be reimplanted back into these big cities to have them survive. Because when you use AI, imagine if you were 20 years old and you went to one of these sustainable cities, and within 4 years, you could have the property paid for and there were no real estate taxes. Would that be beneficial?
Beautiful.
Absolutely.
Yep.
That's possible. That's possible. And you look at what's happening in Florida right now, and you look at what real estate taxes involve. A lot of it, 75% of it is the schools, and the other is administration. But if you built a city that was sustainable, there's the possibility that you could, like I say, own a house after 4 years or 10 years at the most. Would life be better? Because you look at the schools right now, again, the best educator may be right in your pocket. You bring in an Optimus robot, they're in your house, you have a question, you could receive a master's degree and have a built-in teacher. So it's not like you can change a city that's been so ingrained in the way they operate. And you look at Chicago. I mean, Chicago's a disaster. The schools are an embarrassment. Is that going to change overnight?
No.
No.
It's dead. It can't be fixed the way it is. There has to be a revolution.
And New York City's even worse, I think.
Yeah.
Even worse. So just like the Marshall Plan, or when NASA was doing the race to the moon, if America focused on housing, and let's say they picked a spot in upstate New York, a rural area, and you had a master plan designed by AI, and you had the Army Corps of Engineers go in there and build a city, like on the front of the book, where you have like a central spire. Because let's say 50% of the people want to live in a single family home, and 50% of the people want to live in a condominium. If you had a Marshall Plan type operation to build that city as sustainable as possible, think of the innovations that would happen. And remember when America had the best buildings in the world, the Sears Tower?
Yeah.
The Empire State Building?
Yeah.
Now we're not even in the top 20. So the technology's there. There's a way. There's just not the will right now, because we've been doing other things since the 60s, and that's why we're in such a mess. And people don't understand, I don't think. Again, a lot of people do, but we are in the disaster zone area where the average first-time buyer is 40 years old and they still can't afford a house.
Yeah, and
it's not heading in a good direction.
And we really feel it here because this is such a strong first-time buyer market, and they're really getting squeezed. And it's not pretty. It really isn't pretty.
And as you mentioned, it's to put another $20,000 or even $10,000 commission on the buy side on a first-time home buyer that barely has enough money saved for 3% down in closing costs. You push them out of the market.
Yeah. So like I say, there's ways around that. Imagine if every state created a fund where the rate was at 3%. That's a stroke of a pen. You look at how banks are structured today, fractionalized banking. Take for an example a certificate of deposit. Okay, standard banking operation. Certificate of deposit, a 3% rate's pretty good. Somebody that has money takes it in, deposit it in the bank. They deposit it at 3%. The bank has to do all their things, la-di-da-di-da, and all of a sudden the rate's 6% going out the other side. I call that friction. And it happens with real estate commissions. It happens with mortgages. It happens with insurance. It happens with mortgage insurance, title insurance, surveys. All that stuff AI is going to change, So there's definitely ways to do it. But imagine if you just, again, first principles, as Elon Musk says, first principles for the mortgage. People put money in at 3%, and then they take it out at 3%. Because like with fractionalized banking, as I mentioned with the CD, if there's $1 million that come in CDs at 3%, a bank can usually leverage that up to 7 to 10 times that amount in loans, because not everything's going to default. Actually, with primary mortgages, the default rate is very small, 1 or 2%.
Yeah.
So the way things are set up now, there's 250 different steps, in the real estate and mortgage process. Again, first principles, take it down to a land contract. Land contract, there's no bank involved. You have a contract that comes into place. The seller holds the note. 3% is a good rate, and there's really not a lot of other closing costs. I'm saying doing that on a high scale from the standpoint of, let's say the state of New York has a fund, there's money deposited in that fund, but it's leveraged. The total amount of mortgages right now in America is $13 trillion. 13 trillion is the number. Okay, so if it was fractionalized banking, really you only have to put up about $1 trillion to fund that whole $13 trillion for everybody. So you look at BlackRock alone, they manage $11 trillion. So if you say to the investment world, you talk about sovereign funds, for example, like I mentioned, BlackRock, $11 trillion. What if they had to put 10% of their investments into mortgages at 3%? So we're not creating additional money that causes inflation. We're just saying, instead of BlackRock and private equity looking for a 30% return or a 50% return, instead of a 30% return, they might get a 28% return. But everybody in America would have access to a 3% mortgage rate. Would that be helpful?
Yeah.
If you had 3% mortgage rates and 0 real estate taxes, what would that do to affordability? It would greatly increase. Again, you look at home affordability, where 40% of the people owned a home in the 1950s, and that jumped up to 60% by 1960 with the GI Bill, FHA loans, VA loans. So it went from 40% to 60% in 20 years. But we've been stuck at 60% home ownership, 65% home ownership for the last 40 years now.
For all of your
And
life,
a lot of that has to do with interest rates.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And it's interesting how you use the term land contract. That's how we got through the 70s with the interest rates being at 18%. That's how we got through land contracts. And you adapt your strategies for the times that you're in. And it seems like we're not doing any adapting. I don't know, which is why.
Because there's people like it the way it is.
They do.
People
they do.
because
they like self-interest and they like the party that's giving them stuff and all this kind of. And anyway, Pat, we're running down to the end of our thing. You have some seminars coming up and coming that you want to promote, yes?
realestaterevolution.org. It's all on there. There's some classes on there, but to get the book, we talk about again, friction and cutting the costs. On $1 million house right now, it costs about $70,000 in fees to do the deal. I think that can be brought down to about $5,000 when you look at the whole organization. And again, there's ways to do that with AI. When you look at the way everything's put together, and it's broken down step by step in the book. In Massachusetts, you have to have an attorney to close the deal. I'm saying a listing agent is highly valuable, but the market will ultimately determine as long as everybody is informed. And that's a big part of the book. Comes down to fiduciary responsibility. I think most people in the financial world has totally forgot what that means. But if
Yeah.
you're taking care of your client, you have to educate them, and that's really what the book's about. Whether it hurts the real estate person or the attorney or the mortgage banker or whatever, it's going to happen one way or the other. So it's better to be prepared than not.
The truth will set you free. Pat Palzkill, Real Estate
Amen.
Revolution, right here. This is the book. And they want to get a hold of it. It's revolution what?
realestaterevolution.org.
Okay.
.org.
Beautiful. Pat, maybe we could have you back on because we really barely scratched the surface on this book. Barely.
There's a lot in there.
Is
Yeah, I
a
hope you
lot
enjoy
in
it.
here. This is going to become like the Bible for people for the next 10 years for sure. I think for people that are smart enough to get a copy of this. So I highly recommend it. And Pat, thank you for being a guest.
Yeah, thanks, Pat.
Want to wrap it up?
Yeah, no, I can't wait to read that book. And thank you for everyone who's tuned in. Please like, follow, subscribe, and let us know if there's anything you want us to address in our show.
And remember, I'm Brendan Cunningham, the real estate doctor here at EXP. And together, Matt and I, we are those real estate
guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that was great.